Just like grand rounds at Rush, Dr. Kogan, 260 and rising.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Tabs looks like we're slowing down. So welcome everybody. It is 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This is Bill Levine from New York. And welcome to all of you for this webinar number 7 in a series that started back in the pandemic days of March 13th. We hit our 8-month anniversary on Friday the 13th the other day. So I hope everybody's staying safe and healthy, and you and your families are all doing well. We have an incredible crowd tonight. In the upper left corner at my screen, I have Dr. Monica Kogan from Rush University. In the upper right corner, I have Dr. Eric Strauss from NYU, Dr. Sandy Schwartz from UC San Diego, Dr. Don Laporte in the middle Hollywood Squares from Johns Hopkins, Dr. Amitabh Tabs Iyer from the University of Miami, and Dr. Mel Harrington from Baylor. Thanks to Chris Cordero from Columbia, who's doing our webinars once again. And this is going to be about virtual interviews tonight. Probably something that everybody is thinking a lot about now that we've gotten up to this point. We've gone over every other part of the application process, and now we're going to talk about interviews. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Ayer. Everybody, please feel free to fire your questions to the chat room, not to the Q&A room, and I will be monitoring the questions there. And Dr. Iyer is going to be our MC for tonight's festivities. Take it away, Tabs.
Thank you, Dr. Levine. Let me go ahead and share my screen. First off, welcome to everyone. Hope everyone's staying safe. We have a wonderful lineup here. I'm going to go ahead and kick things off with a little video just to kind of give you a sense as to what some of the platforms are looking like. In part, one of the ones that is being used across the country that's named Thalamus, just to give you an idea as to how an interview process might go during the course of your season this coming cycle.
Good morning. This is Bill Levine from Columbia, and welcome to our virtual interviews this year. First, if you could just tell me how to pronounce your first name so I don't get it wrong.
Oh, hey Bill. Yeah, his first name is Amitabh, but you can call me Tabs. That's what most people do.
Well, welcome, Tabs. It's really great for us. We're sorry you can't be here in person, but obviously with the pandemic, this is our new world. So congratulations. We had 780 applications this year, Tabs. We have 6 residency spots, as you're probably aware, and we're interviewing 50 students. So you've made it through a tremendous screening process to get this far. So you should be proud of your success thus far.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, Bill, and I really appreciate that. And certainly it's not without a lot of hard effort and work that this has happened. So I do appreciate it.
Just tell me a little bit about your background, Tabs, your family, and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. So my parents are from India originally, but I was born in Kentucky and grew up in California, and then made my way to the East Coast for medical school, where down here in Miami, and so really wanted to soak up some additional sun to kind of really work on my tan further. And it's definitely been an interesting experience, especially from just like a cultural kind of diaspora sort of element of it all. And so I did my undergrad out in California, but then came here from medical school just to kind of get a different experience, altogether. And so my parents are still back in California. That's where my brother is too. And I am, I'm recently married, and so my wife and I have been living here kind of as I'm kind of heading towards the tail end of medical school altogether.
What would you consider your strengths, Tabs?
Where do I even begin? I think one of the biggest one of the biggest things is that I'm a perfectionist. I think that's probably also a weakness too, if I'm being honest. But I really have to, I really worry and kind of belabor the point of trying to be as amazing at everything I do as possible. And so whether that's even, the way I dress and the kind of the confidence I exude with that, or whether it's just the way I carry myself in the hospital or with faculty or with residents or what have you, it's very important to me that I kind of put on this sort of really put together sort of feel. That I would consider a strength. I also am willing to stay up and help out with, with anything and everything, help my fellow classmates. I'm class president, which is sort of like, I think, tantamount to that. So lots of different things, but I think the biggest strength of mine is that I'm always trying to work, always trying to perfect what I do. But I think that's also a weakness of mine as well.
Dr. Eismont's a very good friend of mine, and he wrote 17 letters of recommendation for the University of Miami students this year, as you know.
Yeah.
And so why would we want to select you over your 16 classmates, Tabs?
Well, first off, being the amazing dresser that I am, my fashion sense is probably better than theirs. So I think that in and of itself, especially in New York, is probably a really good thing. I think the other thing is that even if you compare some of the other kids who are interested in Columbia, like Sohail Desai or Caroline Granger, who are in my class, and they're great friends, but I'm the creme de la creme. And so you're not going to find someone who works harder than myself, and that's even in comparison to other applicants coming from other schools. And this is not to knock any of my classmates, but it is to just say, hey, listen, like I know what I bring to the table, and I'm gonna go all in with everything I do, and just to go all in with everything I do, just to make sure that I do what's in my best, what's in the best interest, not just for myself and my family, but also for my residents, my faculty members, and also most importantly, my patients.
Thanks for sharing that. This is in a weird year with the pandemic. You couldn't do away sub-Is. There were lots of places with virtual opportunities. Where did you spend your time doing virtual programs, and what other programs are you interested in, Tabs?
Yeah, being from California, but then going to like the other side of the country, I've had sort of I haven't really had sort of that epiphany moment exactly where I'd like to go. I think that, I've tried to explore the Midwest, the West Coast, whether connecting via social media or just any of these virtual things. Did Columbia have a virtual thing? Because I remember trying to look for it and couldn't find it.
Yeah, we've had a program for the last 6 months called the CLIP program.
Oh, got it. That's a real bummer. Yeah, so I really just try to look out there and see what's available. It's and was able to get into a couple of great programs. I really would have liked to do the Columbia one, but I guess hindsight's 2020. But I'm really open to going anywhere. There's no real tie that I have specifically. I just want to go where I know there's going to be great, great connection with the great camaraderie amongst the residents and the faculty, and that's particularly important to me.
Tabs, we have a strong emphasis on education and clinical care and also on research. Can you share with me some of your thoughts on research and what you would hope to achieve during your training program?
Yeah, so, research is interesting because, I've been fortunate, I've done a bunch of it, but at the same time, I don't know how much I want to do of it when I, in residency or even in practice, because honestly, it's like I'd rather just be operating. I know that I've learned a lot through research, and I think that's where a lot of my ideas and even interest in orthopedics has come from. But I've also kind of done it because other students, more senior and other residents have said, oh, you have to have like 10 publications or something, and you have to be like the first author in all of them. And how true that is or not, but it definitely kind of stoked the fire to at least get that kind of box checked off, if you will. And so I've worked on stuff that I'm really interested in because I really love basketball. And so like Achilles ruptures, which obviously I've played the NBA over the years. So I've done a lot of work on that, access to care, biomechanical studies. I've done like basic science and of ankle arthritis and a variety of things. But yeah, so it's great. I probably would like to continue it while I'm at a great institution like Columbia. But as far as Whether I do it in practice or not, yeah, I'm not really sure. I've sort of done it just to do it to be fun.
So Tabs, we're coming to the end of the time we have allotted together. I'm sorry it's been going so fast, but I always like to give you the opportunity to ask any questions that you'd like to learn about the department, the residency, anything that's on your mind.
Yeah, well, Bill, thank you for the opportunity to interview here today. I do appreciate it, and especially in this sort of virtual format, it's nice to not have to to stay in the warmth of the Southwest, if you will. But even more importantly, the question I have is like, how important is mentorship to you? Because that's one of the things I've sort of been really wanting to focus on in terms of how I will thrive or how I think I'll thrive. So how important is mentorship to you and to the rest of the department, and what kind of things do you do to kind of espouse that?
So mentorship's one of probably the key principal components of our program. When you come in as a intern, you get assigned to a senior resident as your mentor, and you get assigned to a faculty member as your mentor. And that faculty member will likely change as your interests change. If you get a hand faculty member, for example, but you decide you like pediatrics, you'll naturally evolve towards one of the peds attendings to become your mentor. But it's a very early mentorship program. It's geared towards helping make that transition from medical student to resident to junior resident to senior resident, and then ultimately preparation for fellowship and practice beyond.
Well, that's really awesome to hear, and awesome to hear that everyone gets involved in some way, shape, or form. So, no, thank you for that, and again, thank you again for the opportunity today.
Well, good luck to you, and we'll look forward to hopefully having you get your #1 choice in orthopedics this year, Tabs.
I appreciate it, Bill, and please give my best to your family, and I hope everyone's staying safe.
Thanks. You
do a quick synopsis of what that, and we'll go ahead and send it out a little later. Dr. Levine and I were trying to showcase really some of the big ways in which the interactions among students may occur between students and and a faculty member. And one of the things that I was in part doing during the course of the actual video was actually referring to him by his first name, when in fact being a little bit disrespectful in that way may not be the best way to put your best foot forward, especially in the interview setting. So one of the things I think we really want to kick this off with is, kind of thinking about how do you put your best foot forward when you're going virtual. And that is what I in part would call setting the mood for the interview. What are you going to have to do to actually get yourself in front of this camera without technical difficulties like we just experienced, to make it as smooth as possible? So that way, when you're having this one-on-one interaction with the chairman of Columbia, the program director for NYU, or otherwise, you can actually make the best impression possible. And no matter what, bounce back quickly if there's a technical glitch, just like we're trying to do right now. So on that note, I'm actually going to kick it off to Dr. Kogan and say, so where should you actually do your interview at? And does it make a difference? Should it be in front of a nice screen like you have, or background like you have now? Or should it be in a different area like the rest of the faculty are? Tell me your thoughts on that.
So I think the best place to have an interview is a place where there's the least amount of distractions in the background. So they talk about having a white background.
I'm trying to be as amazing at everything I do as possible.
Oh, it's working.
So that's even, the way I dress.
That was your video. To have the least amount of distractions in the background. So sometimes people have pictures in the background, or artwork, or windows, or dogs, or cats, or babies running around in the background. You want to have the least amount of distractions possible. Some people will have a virtual background, which I think definitely is good as well, but you just want to make sure it's least distracting, and also that you don't kind of become enveloped in it. So I've seen where people have a background and then they start leaning back, and then all you see is their head floating in the background, and that's also, pretty distracting. So a lot of GME programs at medical schools will have rooms available for the students. So it's definitely worth contacting your GME to see if they have rooms available.
This is the problem with virtual backgrounds. It looks a little funny. And then your hands do weird things too. So be careful about them.
So I'll ask Dr. Laporte that question now. That so if you decide to have a background because perhaps just that your roommates are around, they're not in medicine, like they're not being like super respectful of your time. If you're gonna have a background, what kind of background should it be if you're gonna have one at all?
Sorry. So first, I would say if your roommates are around and you're concerned that they're going to be disrespectful, that's the perfect time to go use the room provided by your school of medicine and nice private setting because you don't want distractions or noise in the background. But if for whatever reason you're going to use a virtual background, I think it should be neutral. It shouldn't be distracting, like Dr. Kogan said. It you want them to be paying attention to you and not to your background. So I think a nice white background like Dr. Kogan has, and like you see, and everybody except for myself is good.
I think that's a great point. And another thing is, is it a problem when you're getting this close and personal to the camera, or do you need to be a little bit further away so they can see you and what you're wearing? Like how up close and personal, Dr. Kogan, should students be with regards to the camera placement relative to their, relative to their head and their upper torso?
Yeah, I think just like in a regular interview where you don't want to be in the person's face and leaning forward on their table or on their desk, the same goes for this. You want to be kind of midway in your screen, and you definitely don't want to be too close or too far. You want to be Goldilocks, just right, just in the middle. But
oh, go ahead.
Oh, I just want to reiterate, the whole roommates in the background, kids in the background. I mean, everyone needs to remember that this is an interview and it should be treated like a professional setting. And so, applicants are going to have enough time to make accommodations and make plans. And so definitely have that in consideration.
Now, I tend to use for any of these webinars, and I'll ask Dr. Laporte this question, I use these wireless headphones and in part so that way they're not showing. Do you think it makes, and do you think you might even think about, hey, like if someone's got the big headphones over their head or just the wired ones, or do you think it makes a difference even just from that sort of technical nuance of should you try to have wireless headphones if possible, or does it not make a difference whatsoever? You have what you have and that's not a problem.
I would say you have what you have and that's fine, but practice with it so it doesn't look clumsy. A wireless is easier to look smooth and professional. So just make sure that you're comfortable with what you have and that you're not tripping over it.
That's absolutely I think critical, and I think it's just for you to be it should be as casual or as kind of comfortable as you can, so that way it's as if you're in front of the other person, like physically speaking. So if I'm thinking about how to present myself in general, so we've talked a little bit about the background or not background, the lighting. Dr. Kogan, what should I consider wearing to the interview itself? And knowing that I could be at home, I might be in the student office, what should I be thinking about when I'm actually in terms of, do I have to wear a suit? Do I not? Is there any sort of change in sort of what's considered appropriate attire this time around?
So I would approach this as it's a regular interview and wear what you would wear on an interview day. So jacket, pants, and tie. I would, if you're a male, and then if you're a female, some sort of professional suit. I would recommend wearing.
Great. And do you think that it's really critical that, hey, like I'm talking a lot, I'm answering a bunch of questions, like just like right now, should I have, my energy drink at hand? Can I drink while I'm, interacting with faculty members, or is that a big no-no, or does it look kind of strange if I'm, chomping down a snack because I haven't eaten since whatever time in the morning?
Dawn, you want to take that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine we have the same answer. So I certainly wouldn't be eating during the interview. This like Dr. Kogan said, this is your professional interview. This is just like it's face to face. And I think you can have water or a drink available. And if you're coughing or choking, it's okay to take a sip of water, but I wouldn't be drinking casually like you're meeting somebody for coffee. I would, and I certainly wouldn't be eating.
Yeah, I think that, while sometimes, and I know that while on screen, sometimes with the interviews on Instagram or even here, will sometimes take a sip of water. But imagine if you're right in front of the person, you wouldn't necessarily be, bringing out your snack pack and, going through it while you're talking to them. And so I think that just you have to really get into that mindset. As Dr. Laporte and Dr. Cohen are both reiterating, this practice notion is critical. So you're doing exactly as you would do live. And I think that's something that we cannot reiterate, enough times. One question I'll ask to both of you, Dr. Cohen and Dr. Laporte, is how comfortable can you be, especially if it's your home program, or perhaps you've done a virtual rotation and you know people, or you've got family member, or you've just known like residents. How can you be like chummy with folks, or should you be super, kind of super professional with regards to your interactions, even in this virtual environment? I'll give that to you, Dr. Kogan, first.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you should be as professional as possible. So you may know them, but I would definitely treat this as if it was a real interview and not be overly comfortable with them.
Dr. Laporte, same question.
I would agree. This is the real interview. There is some formality to it. It's a professional interview, and I would treat the interactions professionally and be more formal, than casual. I don't think there's a role for casual interactions or calling a chairman by their first name.
Can I just add one more thing, just back into the what to wear and how to dress? I get a lot of questions from the female applicants on how to wear your hair, which I've got short hair, so it never really occurred to me, but up or down. And I would just say whatever you can, just as long as it's professional looking. I don't think people really care that much.
And for our women faculty on this call, there's a couple of questions about what color suits may be recommended for attire, and for ladies, what to wear underneath the jacket, blouse or button up.
Ooh.
I would err on the side of conservative colors, just because orthopedics as a field is more conservative. But I think that still leaves some openness to it. And I think, at least my opinion, for the blouse, the top underneath, as long as it looks professional, it shouldn't be too low, but as long as it looks professional, I think either of those is an option. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, Dr. Schwartz, you want to chime in on that as well?
Yeah, I totally agree. I wouldn't pick a bold color like a red or a hot pink or something that stands out too much. Neutral colors are good. I agree with a more conservative look rather than something that you might be remembered for in a not good way.
Yeah, I think that in general, and this is kind of a great segue, is that you kind of think of it as sort of like initially trying to make the first best impression that you can. And you are kind of looking into to future colleagues, and you want to really leave them with the best sense about who you are and who you are as an applicant, who you are as an individual. And I think that's really important on all facets, including whether it be what you're wearing to how you conduct yourself during the interview, et cetera. And so with that being said, I'll throw this question to Dr. Strauss to answer first, is what can you tell about an applicant in sort of the first 30 seconds now? And what are those initial observations you make about an applicant?
Absolutely. Well, we don't have the opportunity for the applicant to walk into our room for that interview, to see the smile on their face, to reach out and get a good handshake. So we're making a snap, a lot of us are making that Malcolm Gladwell blink judgment the first time we're seeing their image show up on our Zoom screen. So I think a lot of what you guys just went over with respect to setting the mood is important, because that's the first thing we're going to see. How are you dressed? Is your tie well tied? Is there clutter around in the background? Do you have a big glaring light like I do behind my left shoulder? Like, it's the little things that are gonna have that initial impression that we're getting in this remote setting that we wouldn't have if it was done in person the way that we're all used to it. And one of the things I was going to chime in for that last little segment is, I think what I've been telling our students at NYU is, I agree with you guys said practice. What I think is also important is record that practice and view that recording and see if you're happy with how you're coming across. Is the lighting good? How does the setup that you have in the room where you're going to be doing the interview appear? Because like you said, that first impression is going to go a long way in this remote setting. And you want to basically put your best foot forward. And I think you want to take out any variables in any question. So practice it, view it, make sure you're happy. You can buy yourself some special lighting. You can make sure you can try a couple of different, shirt tie combinations. Make sure that you're going to be, presenting yourself in the best possible fashion, because those first 30 seconds are going to be big ones.
Hey, Tabs,
Go ahead.
Tabs.
Yeah.
I just want to show everybody right now. So I have something, it's called the Loom Cube. It's not very expensive. It actually suction cups onto the back of my laptop. And this is what it looks like without it. So you can see how different that is. And it also comes with a little tripod, because sometimes the suction cup falls off right in the most inopportune time. But it definitely makes a difference. So, it doesn't cost a lot. I think this was like $30, something like that. But I definitely encourage you guys to do something and practice with it and play with it and make sure it looks appropriate wherever you happen to be.
And just before I kind of ask the same question to Dr. Schwartz, I would also suggest no one's expecting you to go out and spend an exorbitant amount of money for headphones or for your what you're wearing or your setup. It's just make sure that, just as Dr. Strauss and others have alluded to, that you have practice in whatever setup it's going to be, whether it's you've MacGyvered it on your own or it's something you've purchased, regardless. So that way you're just putting your best foot forward. That's the bottom line. And again, like even I'm using my daughter's nursery to do this right now as a prime example. And so I don't have a home office or anything that I'm doing it from. So again, like the notion is you just use what you have and make the most of it more than anything. And these are just tips and tricks to think about. Dr. Schwartz, same question. What sort of initial observations do you make about an applicant as PD?
I think this is very different than what we're all used to. Like Dr. Strauss said, we can't get that in-person body language, that handshake. So I think the best thing to do is try to be engaging. Try your best to make eye contact, as odd as that is. Be warm, be friendly, and try not to treat this like a really sterile environment, which it really is, but try not to. And I think just trying to make a connection with that person as though they were there. And it's amazing. We've done some Zoom interviews for other areas within our department, like a nurse practitioner. And it's amazing when somebody's good at this Zoom interview, they stand out. It's incredible what a difference it is. So I think the whole point of practicing recording is really, really important.
Hey, Tabs.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, I'm interviewing for Columbia Medical School this year. It's the first time I've done it, and it's obviously all virtual. And it's amazing. These college kids that are interviewing, they're so poised, they're so professional, they got it all down. So I have no worries whatsoever about these medical students who are so amazing. Just do your due diligence. You don't have to make this harder than it is. But make sure you got a good place, good lighting, good sound. There's a lot of questions in the chat room, like, should I shave or not shave? You guys, you're having an interview. So however you think you best want to present yourself at the interview, if you look like you have 5 o'clock shadow and Joe Zuckerman's talking about why did that guy have 5 o'clock shadow, then you're going to wish that you didn't have 5 o'clock shadow. And if you wear too flashy of a pocket square, and Eric Strauss is saying, why did that guy have such a flashy pocket square, then maybe that's not what you want to be left with. So, you want them to remember you, but you hopefully remember you in the best ways, the positive ways.
I think those are all great. Those are all great points. And I'm going to chime in something about my interview with Dr. Zuckerman in a second, but I want to ask Dr. Harrington kind of along these same lines. Are there any characteristics about the initial engagement that in this kind of 30 seconds, if you will, or whatever period of time you kind of get those initial observations that serve as red flags that are worrisome to you, especially from a PD perspective, looking at these applicants?
I think one of the things, and again, it's going to be challenging to convey it on video as opposed to in person, but you want to see some confidence, but not cockiness. And so, finding that balance. So you do want to come off with a professional appearance. And, that was one of the things I just put in the chat is don't stress out over all the nitty gritty details. just be professional, just as you would as if you were in person, no different. And so, you know, I think when you first meet someone, it is first impressions matter. So you want to appear professional, you want to appear confident, not overconfident. You know, it's hard to tell now without being able to do a handshake. You don't get the limp, you know, the dead fish handshake, but, you know, so you want to come off looking confident, looking like a physician, and looking like someone you would want to work with.
Yeah, I would totally I would totally agree with that as well. I want to ask Dr. Kogan the same question. Are there any red flags that sort of serve as red herrings for you, kind of with these initial engagements?
I would just say arrogance is, you'd be surprised what people say and how they say it, being overly comfortable during the interview. But I would say arrogance is something that really stands out as a negative.
Dr. Laporte, I want to go back to the other question. What are some of the initial observations you as PD sort of make about students when you're first interacting with them that stand out either positively or not so positively?
So I would agree. It's enthusiasm when they walk in the room and engagement. You don't have that walking in the room, but still, starting off, with a positive attitude. Eye contact, which I think is a little tricky virtually as well. And I saw the question come up a few times. Do you look at the camera or at the interviewer? But you don't want to be looking down. You don't want to be fidgeting. And having confidence, which I think comes across through professionalism too. And not that you asked me the red flags, but I think the other thing to throw in there is putting in the time to be prepared. And that's a little different in a virtual interview than when you're interviewing in somebody's office in person. Again, making sure you have a professional background and nobody's interrupting you and your phone's off and there is no sounds that are coming up, and that you're taking this seriously and prepared for the interview.
One of the things those are all wonderful points, and one of the things that we were trying to showcase in the video, which is we're so attached to our phones, and especially now because of doing all this virtual stuff, that you don't want to inadvertently bring your phone into the screen and start texting away while the interviewer is perhaps sharing an experience or sharing a story or asking you a question. Because even if maybe you're looking up the hair product that you and Dr. Zuckerman are talking about, which is what he and I spoke about during my interview. And perhaps while at that time I didn't even have a phone with me, the point is looking at the phone will obviously come off as being a distraction. And that's something you want to just be mindful of too, even if you have the most genuine intent for why you're looking at it. So again, just another thing to sort of think about. Dr. Levine.
So, Eric, do you have any examples? One of the people asked a question. Do you have any examples that you can recall where a student's rank list went up precipitously because of an interview performance? And what was it about the interview performance that did elevate their final ranking? I think that's a great question.
I agree. That is a great question. And to be honest with you, the way we've always conducted ourselves for the interview process is the application got you in the door, and how the interview got, created the rank list. So we actually based our list primarily on the whole package, but the interview played a big portion of it. And we love enthusiasm. We love the applicant, the interviewee, who can demonstrate that they fit into the mold that we think is going to be the most successful resident. The team player, the hard worker, the applicant that kind of did it all and has a track record. So yes, being gregarious, enthusiastic, demonstrating that they knew about our program, that got them up the list, irrespective of maybe they didn't have the highest step one score. Maybe they didn't have the most papers published. It's the whole package, but the interview definitely plays a huge part in how we assess potential residents at NYU.
I want to kind of move on to a Jeopardy round, what we consider sort of all the questions. And I'll ask this to, Dr. Harrington first is, we constantly, I know I've received, and I'm sure you have faced over the years, the question of tell me about yourself. And so when that question gets thrown out there, then how should students be handling that question, and what specifically should they be sharing when that question gets asked?
I think that's a good time to really point out things that make you unique, If there's anything that you think may not come across on paper as well as you would like, you know, if you have anything any unusual skills or hobbies or things that may be relevant to make you a better applicant. So, you know, I think it's the time to, you know, try to show off yourself. And that's something I think we are all, you know, not as good as we probably should be at selling ourselves, but that's when you really want to do it.
Do you think that there are certain facets of your journey that you need to talk about? So for instance, you know, hey, like you are a reapplicant. Is that a time to bring up, I didn't match this past cycle, and what I've been doing in that time is sort of part of that journey and sort of expression of how you've kind of combated various difficulties? Or is that something you would leave if the question gets brought up specifically?
I think that's actually probably a great time if you're a reapplicant. You know, the thing I always look at for the reapplicants is, you know, what did you do, and were you introspective? Did you evaluate why you thought you didn't match the first time, and then what have you done to improve your application? And so that, you know, that really gives us a good idea of, you know, how mature, responsible, introspective are you.
Awesome to hear. Dr. Strauss, if a student gets asked about strengths and weaknesses, what things should they be talking about with the idea of trying to differentiate themselves without sounding overconfident or arrogant, as Dr. Kogan alluded to earlier? And so what are sort of better responses to that question versus suboptimal ones?
This always comes up. And I think with respect to the question you just asked, Dr. Harrington, and then this one, these are questions I think you have to almost prepare in advance and practice it to the point where it doesn't sound practiced. The strengths is going to give you the opportunity to demonstrate why you as an applicant are going to fit well and thrive in the program you're interviewing for. If you know that it's a big program, one of your strengths is you're a good team player, you function well in large groups. If it's a small program, you really are good with interpersonal interactions. You got to tailor it to the audience, I think. Everyone always is good about their strengths. The weaknesses is where I think some of the applicants get into trouble. And I think, you have to acknowledge we all have weaknesses, and just responding with like, I'm a perfectionist or I work too hard, those are cop-outs. And I think they either demonstrate either a lack of insight or like a red flag ego. So I think you have to think about it and come up with a weakness that it's actually disguised as, it's a strength disguised as a weakness. They always talk about hard skills and soft skills. I think you want to focus on hard skills. So like an example, I've noticed that, on my clinical rotations, I have, in our hospital, there were a lot of Spanish speakers, and, I didn't have that ability. So I've been taking medical Spanish, and I've noticed that it's improved my ability to deliver good clinical care. So you had a weakness that you showed that you addressed and improved upon, and it wasn't like a soft skill problem, like I have trouble dealing with authority, or some problem that would actually be a red flag. So I think you got to be smart about it, but use it as to kind of the way to twist it and make it kind of a strength.
Yeah, Eric, I think that the number one pet peeve of every interviewer is when someone's asked what your weakness is and they say that you're a perfectionist. It's like, please don't say that. Dr. Kogan has a answer to one of the questions from the chat box. Dr. Kogan.
No, someone had a very good question about taking notes during the interview and what people's perception were on that. I don't know why people during a regular interview aren't taking notes, they're writing things down. And so I just didn't know what other people's viewpoints were on taking notes or having notes on the laptop during the interview.
What do you think, Dr. Schwartz?
I think most interviews are probably 10 to 15 minutes, and hopefully you can wait to write that down until the very end. We heard, I think anything that we do besides participate actively in the interview is going to look distracting, that you're not really paying attention. I can't imagine there's something so important you can't wait to write down 10 minutes later.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you just have to remember that unless in your humble opinion and you've practiced this, or you're just naturally really good at staring at the computer and typing in whatever sort of section of your computer you're going to be taking notes on, it's very easy, especially in this sort of one-on-one, to see the eyes darting away. And especially if we're thinking about where you kind of look in the camera, you want to not be that create that distractive sense, because that will the interviewer will notice it, or may potentially notice it. So I would, as Dr. Schwartz said, and Dr. Kogan was saying too, I would wait until the interview's done to take copious notes.
Hey, Tabs.
Yeah.
Let's do the one question from our fake mock interview that we wanted to make sure we covered.
Which one?
So Tabs, you're an outstanding student this year from the University of Miami, and there are 17 students this year applying from your school. So why should we take you, Tabs, over your 16 colleagues?
So because I'm the creme de la creme, and specifically because, I'm going to outwork anyone around me. And even my fellow classmates who are great, and I'm not knocking them whatsoever, but I'll be there earlier than them. I'll stay there later than them, and certainly will do more for not only my residency batchmates, but also my faculty members, and most importantly, my patients. And so that's definitely something you'll get from me versus the remainder of my classmates.
How do you like that answer, Eric?
It's a little aggressive.
Just for the record, I would not answer like that in a real interview situation, as a disclaimer. But I think it goes back to this notion of, how do you differentiate yourself? And I'll kind of ask that to Dr. Schwartz now. So someone asks, so we've got 16 or 17 applying, excuse me. What would you expect from a student, who's being asked, what differentiates you from the remainder of your classmates, and especially in many pockets of the country where there are multiple students who are applying from a given school?
Yeah, I think that is I love asking this question because I always love to hear the responses. I would say, number one, don't throw your fellow students under the bus. I would never say anything negative about one of the co-applicants. I think, again, this is the time to say why you are, what advantage you have, what strength you have. I love the Spanish example we just heard. If you speak fluent Spanish and that's something helpful in that hospital, bring that up. If you have a certain experience prior to medical school with working with patients, bring that up. You could say, I've been told I'm really good around patients. I've won this award, that kind of thing. So highlight yourself without putting the others down. And everyone's going to work hard, and everyone's going to say they're the first to show up and they're the last to leave. And everyone's going to say they're going to try their hardest. I think that's all pretty generic. So I think this is the time to really highlight what you want to get across that may have been gleamed over on paper, or there was no opportunity to put it on your CV.
Hey, a question that just came up, I want to incorporate this is, someone asked about in the same way, because, hey, maybe you're interviewing a handful, a couple, 1, 2, however many from a given school. So isn't, if you're already differentiated in some way, what kinds of things can you really showcase specifically with that question at the interview time specifically, beyond that of whatever the institution has used to sort of, screen your application, thus far? And I'll ask Dr. Harrington that specifically.
Well, I mean, having reviewed 17 applications from the same institution recently, all the students are different, and everybody does have different life experiences, and that's where you really have to highlight it. And like Dr. Schwartz said, talk about what you've done in the past, what awards you may have won, things that are unique to you. And again, I think it's a great time to show that you're a team player by complimenting your colleagues and not throwing them under the bus. I think if you throw them under the bus, then you will automatically drop off the rank list most places.
Yeah, I would also just add in that it's not just necessarily about differentiating from your fellow students or fellow classmates applying, because let's just say you're only one student applying for, to ortho from your school. It's also about how you're in part separating yourself out from the remainder of your applicants, and in the sense of, hey, like what makes you stand out, what makes you unique, and being able to articulate that, because the paper stuff, yeah, that's great, but how someone sort of exudes that, just like we were talking about that confidence and understanding, I think that's also different too, because what you may see on paper may be very different in the interviewing environment, and that sort of dichotomy is really important to understand, especially from the program director perspective. Dr. Strauss, would you agree with that?
I think 100%. I think you hit it on the head.
Well, hey, Tabs?
Yeah, go ahead.
Tabs, a couple of things. Number one is there's a number of questions coming up. What if I have something negative in my application? And obviously I've been selected for the interview, so that goes without saying. So we're at the interview and I have a red flag on my application somewhere. Do I bring that up or do I wait for the interviewer to bring that up? Dr. Laporte, what are your thoughts?
I think if it's something like misdemeanor or something that was minor, I usually would address it in the interview. I would hit it head on and just say, this is the explanation. This, this is what was done about it, or this doesn't mean anything. Academically, if you're reapplying, I would address that, because I think it's an opportunity to address why you're a better candidate this year and what you've done to make yourself a better resident. But if you got a pass in one clerkship versus, all honors and everything else, I don't know that I would bring that up unless somebody else brought it up, because you've already gotten to the interview. So I guess if it can help show something that's not in your application necessarily, and say what how you've addressed maybe a challenge, I think that's helpful to bring up.
And are any of you from your programs doing a skills session that you might have done if you were live? If you did do a skills session, several questions have asked about that. Knowledge rooms, skill rooms. Are any of you guys doing that in your interviews this year?
Nothing planned.
We're not.
No. If I were going to ask you guys one thing, if I were going to ask you all one thing that you're looking for in the interview, that's going to be kind of the it factor. Can you give me, Monica, you want to start? What's going to, I think the students all kind of want to understand, what about the interview differentiates, because we're trying to, it's kind of nebulous. So what are you looking for, Monica?
I'm looking for someone that's well-rounded.
Well-rounded, okay.
Yeah.
Eric, what are you looking for?
I agree, well-rounded, but I also want to know that they've gone the extra mile and this is a tough year. They're making decisions on little data. I want to know that they've really researched our program, understand what kind of makes us who we are, and they truly believe that they're going to fit in and thrive.
Mel?
Again, looking for someone who knows a bit about our program, and really just looking for a fit, somebody who's enthusiastic, motivated to learn, and somebody I can put up with for 5 years.
Tabs.
I would kind of echo all those sentiments. I also want to know, during this time of COVID, what did you do? What did you do during that time to really sort of get ready for the application cycle? Did you work on research? Were you doing volunteering stuff? I kind of want to know, like, hey, what did you do during that time to sort of help your, fellow man, if you will, or man or woman, I should say. And I think that's, particularly important, at least in my mind.
Don, what's the one thing you're looking for in the interviews?
Somebody who can work well with others, but also somebody who's not afraid of hard work and getting their hands dirty.
Sandy?
I think all of those above, which obviously doesn't make it 1 point, but I think also to add, since it's a very artificial environment, I think the ability to hold a conversation with somebody and interact with them and engage them, I think is going to be really important. I think the residents who have trouble are those that they do fine in the interview, and then in real life, they can't talk to patients. They can't really talk to consultants. So I think communication maybe is the best way to sum that up.
It brings up a really good point, and one of the questions, and I actually asked Dr. Schwartz this first. So when, along those lines of communication, how long should answers be? You know, you're asked a question, should they be super detailed? Or should you be kind of short, sweet, to the point? And do you think it matters on just the type of question, or if someone is more verbose, they should just talk? Or do they really need to work on sort of reading the room, depending on A, the program, and B, obviously the question at hand?
I think everything you said is totally accurate. You have to read the room. You have to, know the type of question. The tell me about yourself is much more open-ended than what was your favorite memory during medical school. I think if an interview starts with tell me about yourself, the applicant should be very aware that they have 10 minutes, 15 minutes, however many minutes. And we've had people talk for 12 of those minutes. And if you're that interested in telling your life story and not telling anything else, then go ahead. But I think there's a lot more things to cover than just that open-ended question. So I would keep that short and sweet, touch some highlights, and then move on to the next topic.
That's I think that's a really good point. Oh, Dr. Arrington.
I would say it, a lot of it's going to be variable. I have some partners who are at both ends of the spectrum. I have one who would love it if our interviews were 2 minutes because they make their split-second decision and they're bored after 2 minutes of chit chat. And then I have others who will talk for 30 minutes. So, I think it is a bit reading the crowd and, just especially since we're on Zoom, being cognizant of your total amount of time.
Dr. Kogan, a lot of times, and I went through this too, going through the process twice, there's a lot of different sort of questions that get asked, right? Kind of like off the wall ones, like what superhero power would you have? What 3 celebrities would you have? Or, questions that are just, a little bit left field. Those questions, if they come up, what's the point of those questions? Is it the answer? Is it just how you respond? Like what goes into those sort of different style questions beyond that of why do you want to go into orthopedics and what your strengths and weaknesses are?
I think those questions are just mostly just to get to know the applicant and for a conversation piece. Some of the questions I tell medical students that, if you have a resident room, they're going to ask you to tell a joke. So that you're going to be asked certain questions. So in the resident room, they're going to ask you to tell a joke, which can be a very tricky subject because it needs to be clean. And so, because you don't know who's sitting across from you and it is an interview and you want to make sure that you're as professional as possible. But, for all those other questions, I usually just take those questions as just trying to get to know you in a conversation piece, just to kind of see how easy it is to hang out with you and talk.
That's awesome.
I don't think people put too much merit in what your superpower would be.
Okay. Is there, out of everyone in the group, is anyone looking for sort of just the response, just to see how they think on their feet, even if the question is, technically uncomfortable, if you will? I'll throw that to Dr. Laporte.
Sure. Yeah, I think a lot of it is, how, can somebody think on their feet? Can they respond and keep moving if they don't have an answer? I think somebody, brought up, what if you didn't know what the X-ray shows? It's okay, not to know or, not to have the perfect answer, but just to respond to keep the conversation going. So I think there's a definite component of that. And I think some of the standardized questions are like that too, where they're going to ask you and, the other 10 people that they interview that day, the same question. And they just want to see, how you interact. So don't get stuck on any one question.
Hey Tabs,
Yeah.
This is getting back to Eric, and I think a lot of your points. One of the things that where the students on tonight's Zoom can really help differentiate yourselves is when you get asked the question from the interviewer, do you have any questions for me? If you ask, the first thing you say are, what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses and what changes do you perceive in the next 5 years? The interviewer they just went into asystole because that's not what they are looking for. So please think of something, and that's where it gets back to what Dr. Strauss said and what you've heard from all of these great panelists. They want you to have done a little bit of research, and they want you to say, yeah, I have some questions. Dr. Strauss, you've done this incredible research in articular cartilage restoration, and I actually did a study at my program, and we did this, this, and this. What do you think about that? Like in 10 seconds, that is so much more impactful than what changes do you perceive in the next 5 years, right? And yeah, you can't do it for 1,000 people, but for your top places and at the places that you guys are telling your mentors, those are your number one, top places. That's the kind of research and the kind of preparation that you should be doing. That's what our peers do in the non-medical world when they're, studying a law firm or studying a business that they're going to join, right? So don't fall into the trap of strengths, weaknesses, and what changes, please.
That's a great segue to which is my other question, which is, how do you convey your interest to the program? And I know that's probably something that's coming up, hey, like you're finishing up the interview, your interview went however it went, you loved it, you didn't, but there's certain programs you totally think you can see yourself at. How should you, and I'll start with Dr. Strauss, like how should students be conveying their interest in your program? And then we'll kind of go around the room.
I think this is going to be a year where your mentors are going to play a huge role in the process. A lot of us, we're relying on the opinions of those that we trust out there at all these various schools and programs to tell us about their students because they couldn't spend time with us for an in-person rotation. So I think having if a student really knows their top, 1, 2, maybe even 3 places, having their mentor at their home program reach out to those that they know at those institutions, that's going to go a long way.
Dr. Schwartz?
I think it's a very delicate line to walk. I think number one, don't ever tell a program you're their number one choice if you're not. That definitely, you can figure that out if they don't match there. I think it's very safe to say everything I've ever heard about your program, and if you know somebody there or residents that have gone there from so-and-so, this interview confirmed my feelings and I would be honored to train here. I believe I would fit in well here. Anything positive like that I think would help. And then like Dr. Strauss said, maybe a follow-up from a mentor saying, so-and-so told me this was their number one program, that kind of thing. I just think I personally would be careful in an interview to say that you're my number one, but I don't know what everyone else thinks.
Okay, great point. Dr. Harrington, same question.
Yeah, I would say, we hear I'm going to rank you first all the time. And every time match day rolls around, I'm like, okay, where you at? So, I heard it from our Baylor students and other students. And so I never believe it. But, I think it's true if you are truly interested in a program, it certainly doesn't hurt to express your interest. I know there's always the rumor mill of, some people holding grudges and blackballing you for the rest of your life, but I don't think that's really true.
Dr. Kogan, same question. You're muted, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that if you are truly interested in the program, on the interview, you can express your interest, having a mentor reach out. I think that the students who don't have mentors or who come from programs where they don't necessarily have somebody who can reach out for them, I don't want them to think that they're at a disadvantage because of that. So just, in that situation, I would 100% reach out to the programs and on the day of the interview, let them know that you're interested.
Yeah, and I think that came up again here in a second. And I would just say, even leave no stone unturned, right? So there's ways to connect with the residents now via many social media pages. Obviously, there's been virtual opportunities. You can certainly connect with the residency coordinators themselves. They may have someone who's the liaison. So and then of course, even if you have faculty who may not be as connected, faculty members or your program directors or just faculty mentors can still reach out and still send an email. And that may be all it takes, but I would still use every sort of outlet you can to try to maximize your opportunity. I do want to ask one important question and I'll put this to Dr. Laporte. If there are, there's obviously the NRMP has, questions that are considered inappropriate. If these questions get brought up, right, to what is sort of the best way for applicants to handle said questions?
Good question. So as Dr. Ayer said, you shouldn't be asked, any questions about, do you want to have children during residency, about your race or gender. If you're asked something that you're uncomfortable answering, you don't need to answer. But if you're interested in the program, I think you can spin that question around into a more comfortable question to answer. And that may be a good move. And so, for example, if somebody asks you, do you want to have children during residency? How are you planning that? You can, turn that around to, you can just say, I don't know, and move on from there. And that's completely fine. Or I haven't thought about that. Or you can turn it around to talk about, how it's great to have women in orthopedics and you have great role models or something along those lines. So I think that, one, the person who's asking that question may not mean anything by it, and it's just innocent. I wouldn't judge the program by that, but I also, wouldn't, engage or answer anything you're uncomfortable with.
You can also take Dawn's answer and just say, that's a really great question. How have you handled that up to this point as a program? Do you have any residents who've taken time off? Do you have what's your parental leave policy? You can turn that around and just flip it back to them a little bit and take the onus off of you.
And I would also chime in with many times there's tough questions that you're getting, stay calm and just think for a second before you respond, and think about just, hey, what the experiences that your people you've observed in the same, in orthopedics or otherwise, whether it be, fellow students, or residents, faculty mentors, and how they have handled some of these things going forward, and sort of maybe integrate some of those experiences that you've seen them go through into your answers as well, whether the question is, super uncomfortable or not. But again, it may go back to the notion of just stay as calm as you can and take solace in the confidence of take solace in your application strengths as you're answering them. I want to go around the room again and ask about thank you notes, because I know this has sort of been the perennial question. Should I send them? Should I not send them? Dr. Kogan, thank you notes or no thank you notes?
No thank you notes.
Dr. Laporte?
No thank you notes, but say thank you when you're done with your interview.
Okay. Dr. Harrington?
No thank you notes.
Okay. Dr. Schwartz?
Nope.
And Dr. Strauss?
Definitely no thank you notes.
Okay. And Dr. Levine? Okay. So no, and again, is this obviously no thank you notes to the coordinator, no thank you notes to the program director across the board?
Well, the reality is we tell the students no thank you notes, and partly because we do our rank list immediately after our interview. So the thank you notes are already, and people still feel like it's polite and professional to do so. So people will send thank you notes, but you shouldn't feel like you're doing it to influence your rank list or your ranking or anything else. So if you're doing it just simply because you were brought up that it's polite and professional to send a thank you note, we're not saying don't do that. I think what we are saying is don't do it with the expectation that it's somehow going to manipulate the system, or conversely, if you don't do it, that it's going to negatively manipulate your position. Tabs, I know we're a little bit over, but since we had the technical glitches, which were on purpose to show the students what happens if we have technical difficulties when you have your virtual interviews, why don't we go for 4 more minutes and then we'll call it a night.
That sounds great. I think another sort of just important thing to be mindful of is, how quickly should you start thinking about your rank lists? And, should you say, hey, if you have a program that's your number one, you're like, hey, I'm convinced this is it, I don't care. I know, Dr. Schwartz, you said you shouldn't say something or maybe discourage saying they're your number one, but if you know, and you're for sure that's what you're going to rank, is there any harm in telling them right then and there? Or should you let them know later on at some point when you are making your rank list that they are your number one? Do you think that influences things at all?
I maybe if I said you shouldn't say it, I meant don't say it unless it's 100% true. Because like Dr. Harrington said, you hear it frequently and you really know when people lied, and it just leaves a little bit of a bad taste in your mouth. So I think if you're 100% certain, absolutely tell them. Like Dr. Levine just said, rank lists get made pretty darn quickly. So if the student waits to let the program know, it's probably way past the time that it even hits their radar. So if you're going to do it right then and there, but be very, very honest about it.
Okay. One thing that's probably going to come up a lot, what is the best way to, and I'll send this to Dr. Kogan, if someone didn't match and they're reapplying, what in your mind is the best sort of response to that question? Why do you think you didn't match?
I would be honest. I would take a look at the application, take a look at your application, and give give why you think you didn't match, whether it be that your scores last year weren't, the previous year weren't great, if you needed more research, if you didn't have a great mentor, if you weren't advised well, or if you didn't reach out, if you weren't as proactive. I would just be as honest as you possibly can. I mean, the answer I wouldn't give is I have no idea why I didn't match, because then it really shows that you haven't really thought about what you could have done to improve it.
And I just want to chime in as someone who didn't originally, and I've shared this a few times, very much the struggles you've gone through in life, whether it's not matching, whether it's personal, whatever, those are all defining characteristics in your life. And I would certainly, as Dr. Strauss was saying earlier, use that as a way to kind of talk about the strength that you've gained by going through said challenge. And I think that that's particularly important to be able to convey, whether it's talking about reapplication or other things in your application, or reapplying or other facets of your application that you want to bring up. I do want to ask Dr. Strauss, because the question came up about, hey, the universal interview invite on 11/23. Is there a number that people should be thinking about getting or not getting this year? Obviously, the sort of number of ranks in past years based on NRMP data is kind of vacillated between 10 and 12. Do you think it's going to be lower this year? Do you think it's going to be higher this year in terms of what students should be thinking about with regards to that number? Just knowing that, hey, there's going to be a lot of people sort of not fighting, but like trying to get interviews or as many interviews as possible.
I think that's a great question. I was going to, as soon as I heard you start with this question, I was going to allude to that NRMP data that was put out like a year or two ago. And the permutation was such that I think you had a 90% chance of matching if you had 11 interviews. That was the number, at least based on the slightly older data. This year, I think that number might be a little higher just based on the mathematics involved. The numbers from every program director that we've heard from of the sheer number of applications that we're receiving and reviewing all seem to be increased across the board. So I think it's still going to be in that 11, 12, 13, but I think it's going to be slightly higher than what the data showed before. But that's just a guess.
Got it. Dr. Levine, same question.
Well, I don't know that we know the answer. We're going to find out so much about the post-COVID year this year, and so I think it's just anybody's guess. Eric might be right, and I think we're gonna. The bottom line I think that we all continue to say is that most of you have heard throughout this entire 9 months that you should have been doing a lot of your work leading up to November 23rd. Interview invitation day, universal day is not the time to start asking your mentors to get busy. So they hopefully have been getting busy for you up to this point, because once those invites go out, then it's going to be tough. There's a lot of questions, tabs that people have been asking about what happens after the universal interview invitation date. And I think the answer to that is it very much is dependent on if the same 50 students get the same 50 invites to every single program, then that's going to influence a lot on what happens with the second and third and fourth waves. And if it's more disparate, then there's going to be differences there. So we're not going to really know. This is the first time we've done this. So I know the students are clamoring to know, is there going to be a second wave and a third wave and a fourth wave? And it really does. If you offer 50 and you get 50 yeses, there's no second wave. If you offer 50 and you get 30, you're going to have a big second wave. So a lot of it is really much unknown until we see how this plays out. I don't know that there's any other way that we can figure that out until we see what happens next week.
I think that's all extremely true, and it'll be anybody's guess exactly what happens. Dr. Harrington?
No.
I would say one of the concerns that I think we've all had, and there's now data showing that it's sort of the 80-20 rule, where there's a 20% of the superstar applicants who get 80% of the interview offers. And I would just encourage those of you out there who are those superstars who on Monday end up with 50 interview offers just because it's Zoom and now you don't have to travel to 50 places and you could potentially do that many interviews. You don't need to do that many. If you do 20, that's plenty. You're going to match wherever if you get that many offers. So really think about it, because if you take up 50 spots, there goes the match day for your colleagues.
Yeah, and I think, Mel, what you said is so important, and it's actually for the top students, and you guys know who you are, hopefully from your mentors at your programs. You probably don't need to interview at more than 5 or 6 programs. You can really tailor it down. So talk to your mentors. If you really know where you want to go, this is the time to signal with your mentors, and there's nothing wrong with that. We can't ask you guys. You can tell anybody where you want to go this year, like any year. And I think that's going to help you guys have less stress, those that are at the top of the food chain, and then all the other outstanding students. The goal is to get you all to match. And so we do that. We've been trying to preach this, and I know people don't believe this, but the more you work collectively together, the better off we are, and the less of you are going to be reapplying next year. Tabs, you want to finish it up?
Yeah, I think this has all been wonderful. It's great to hear. I'm so honored and humbled to be surrounded, at least virtually, by such esteemed faculty from all parts of the country, from West Coast and Midwest to the East Coast and Northeast. I want to share with all the students that, listen, this is a tough time. Everyone's sort of you're not on Lonely Island. Everyone's sort of going through the same process. It definitely is anxiety evoking, and I'm not going to discount that whatsoever, but just know that, hey, you're trying your best and that's all you can do. You have to let the cards sort of fall where they fall after next week, and just know that you've got lots of folks around you who are willing to support you, ourselves included. So thank you again to Dr. Kogan, Dr. Strauss, Dr. Schwartz, Dr. Harrington, Dr. Laporte for being with us tonight. Always thanks to Dr. Levine. Again, if you have any questions, concerns, please feel free to reach out to me and reach out to, you can reach out to Dr. Levine as well. Don't hesitate to ask us any other questions you might have, and best of luck this coming week. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody. Thanks, Chris Cordero from Columbia. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.